All right. Well, welcome back to the So There I Was podcast. I'm your host, Travis Womack. Today we have Vince Fowler, former Canadian paratrooper. That's the shortest version of introduction I'm ever going to give, because I'm sure it's much longer than that. And I'm going to get all the units and stuff wrong. So I'll allow you to do that, Vince. Kind of an awesome thing again about how LinkedIn is just the never ending trail of connections. I did a podcast with a friend of Vince's, Joss, a while back, and then posted that and say, hey man, I got to tell my story too. So here we are. I'm looking forward to it. And anytime you get two paratroopers in one room, it's chaos is going to happen. So welcome and glad you're here.
Thanks very much, man. It's an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. The official unit, Canadian Airborne Regiment, subunit 2 Commando, and we all come from somewhere. So my parent unit would have been Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, originally starting with the 2nd Battalion. And then after the Airborne Regiment was disbanded, boo, hiss, I went off to the 3rd Battalion, PPCLI, and finished off there with the Parachute Company. So started airborne, finished airborne. Yeah, good times under canopy. So yeah.
It's great. So we talked on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and I told you that kind of one of my, the fun part of it being the airborne community is the pursuit of foreign countries' wings. And I was like, man, if there's one that's like in the American Army, at least for my friends and stuff, was if you get your hands on Canadian wings. But y'all don't do like the country jumps. You have to go to the Canadian school. Is that correct still, or was it when you were there?
In part. So we do, we have, we call them Menton days. I think it's Menton, Montana or something. Anyways, Menton days would be hosted by the Airborne Regiment, and a bunch of foreign jumpers would come in from wherever, United States, Germany, and so on. And they would get a series of jumps over the course of 3-4 days. And it'd just be one giant jump fest. I think in the United States, you have Leap Fest.
Yeah.
So it was our version of that. And at the end of that, so there'll be some ground stage, of course, how do we do it? Our JMs, our aircraft, our aircraft drills and such, our landing, especially our exit drills, very different than your exit drills.
Yeah.
And specifically when the jumper hands the static line, it's not a hand. We whip it. We don't just politely pass it to the jump master. It's a very intentional forced throw, and then we exit the aircraft. So
interesting.
At the end of that, there'll be a wings presentation for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's rare. It's rare that you just do one jump with us and get your wings, I bet. Yeah. Now I left the military in 96, so maybe things are different. But back then, someone would participate in either the jump school or they'd participate in this annual Jump Fest experience during Menton days, and definitely go home with a set of Canadian wings. You get not cherry wings. Let me rephrase it. You get red wings. So wings as in, the maple leaf is red versus white. White is operational wings, and red is your Canadian jump qualified.
Right.
Yep. So
that's like the backing on ours, where you have wings when you've been to school, but if you have the oval backing, means you're in an active unit. So.
Oh, is that what that means? I never knew.
Yeah.
So if you just have the wings alone,
means you're certified, but you're not in an active jump status. But if you have the backing, means you're in a unit currently that is actively jumps.
So if you leave that unit, do you lose that backing as well? Do you have to remove the backing?
Take the backing off because you're no longer. It's just one of those.
Got it.
Like when I was in 325 at Bragg, or now Fort Liberty, it was blue border with a white center. It's good for the 325th Regiment. So.
That's what I remember. I remember blue, but I didn't realize the correlation between the backing and no backing. Yeah, that makes sense. That's good to know. It's nice to know with the person you're looking at.
Yeah, the American Army is pretty, at least the airborne for sure, is like you can look at a beret or the backing and immediately know exactly what unit they're in, like instantly, because all the berets are red, obviously, but the shield, the crest on it is like blue and white is 325th or 2nd Brigade now, and then there's like the 504th is a blue and yellow, and then the Devil Dogs is the Panthers is, I should probably know this color. Nobody ever talked to the Panther Brigade. They were not very nice to us. we always stole their little like statue of Panther, and we always got in trouble for it. So, but you mentioned something though on our phone call about jumping into Holland drop zone on then Fort Bragg, and if you're from Fort Bragg ever and been there, stationed there, you hear stories about the green ramp accident. I would love to hear kind of what all, because that's during your time, and kind of what your experience was.
Yeah. Yeah. So my unit, 2 Commando specifically, the rest of the regiment stayed home, but 2 Commando went down, and we spent a month with the 325. And I think over the course of our time there, we did 3 jumps for sure. There might have been a 4th, but on this particular one, we were scheduled, and we had there was a particular delay. So we got delayed by a day. So stopped, dropped 24 hours off. And then we show up at Green Ramp. We get all dressed. This is like, I'm thinking this was our 2nd jump, maybe 3rd. And it was all tied into, every single jump was all related to a particular exercise. The length would vary. But on this particular exercise, we dress at Green Ramp. We sit around, and there's all these aircraft all lined up for us. And there was probably 12, 13 aircraft. There was quite a few, because there was us, our unit, there was members of the 325. We do what we do, you get on, get in the aircraft, and away you go. And we jump in at midnight-ish, something. It was dark when we exited the aircraft. I remember Holland was on fire. There was a grass fire, and Francis McGilvery it's probably set off by a paraflare or something. Artillery was, I don't know, like there was some simulation. So at any rate, I remember 2 guys in our unit, their parachute caught fire when it hit the ground. They cut and released quickly. One of the guys, either Frank or Francis, their rucksack got lit up on fire. So they're out all they have is their rifle and whatever they got on them. And they rescue as much stuff as they possible. We do, everything's training ammo, miles gear. And we do this recon. We get to where we're supposed to be, all night long recon. We get to where we're supposed to be. We kind of chill out in this very soggy, wet spot with eyes on, not very far, but eyes on a Fibua site. And so just before daybreak, we assault this Fibua site. We get into all this Fibua warfare stuff. Tons of fun, because you guys really do it up. You have these proper Fibua sites built up. Super fun, night vision, like I said, miles gear and everything. And everything's awesome. So that ends. So now it's full on daytime the next day. We do a live fire shoot later on with some guys from the 325. So that was a ton of fun. We were in love with the amount of ammo you guys bring to live fire shoots.
Oh yeah.
And it was really interesting, because, they were all done on, I think, section size or platoon size. Shocking how vague this is to me all of a sudden. But we remember, because it's set up so there's a bit of a advance towards contact, right? And all of a sudden you hear a few rounds fly, and we were thinking, is that us or is that 325? And another crew would go, and there was a little bit of erupt, and then all of a sudden the next crew goes, and we knew for sure the next crew was our guys, and it was like 3 times the ammo just lighting up on this live fire shoot. And we started to laugh, like, because when we get ammo, like unlimited ammo, essentially, this was so much fun for us to let loose on all this. And our first rule of contact is to win the firefight, and it's just lay down as much suppressing fire as possible to just say, hey, we're here in charge. Naturally, in a real life situation, you only have frontline ammo, and we probably blew it all and then some. Anyways, tons of fun, lots of laughs. If you weren't on the firing line, you're doing your job, and you're just laying back, eating cake, whatever. So this all ends, and our platoon commanding officer, he comes over, Major Hammond, and he becomes a much more important guy than he is already later in the world. But he just says, all right, troops, it's time to earn the purple hat. And we're like, what does that mean? We don't really like his humor a whole lot. As much as we like him, we don't like his humor. Which means it's time to earn the Maroon Beret. And it's 35 miles back to barracks. And he goes, all right, ruck up. And we're like, holy shit, is he serious? Like, even for us, this was a bit, but we're in the presence of our American counterparts, and we want to put on a show. Okay. So in other words, it's a dick measuring contest.
For both sides.
So we start rucking back. And in the process of rucking back to the shacks, which ended around midnight, I remember it taking roughly 7 hours to get home. At any rate, we remember seeing this big, giant black plume of smoke, just this constant stream of black smoke going up and up and up. And we thought nothing of it. Nothing of it. We just figured someone was burning garbage. We had no clue. And when we finally arrived on base, nothing seemed out of the ordinary because, of course, Green Ramp is nowhere near the 325 barracks.
Yeah, opposite side base.
And we just thought nothing of it. And then we found out, I think the very next morning, what had happened. And the story we heard, and which I still believe is accurate, is an F-16 had a midair bump into a C-130. So the C-130 landed okay, but the F-16 came in. The pilot ejected, and the F-16 hit Green Ramp tarmac and just went through some of these C-130s, C-131s on the at Green Ramp, just started ripping them to shreds. And anybody with a car or an armored vehicle was starting to bus bodies and casualties to hospital, and became the Green Ramp disaster. Yeah, right. So again, as naive as we are, we don't even phone home about this. We don't think that, obviously this is 94. So right. This is well before social media.
Card for that.
And we say nothing. Well, little did we know it made the 6 o'clock news back in Canada. And so because none of us phoned our parent, we didn't phone our parents, we didn't phone our spouses, people back home thought we were at Green Ramp. And if there was another weather delay, we would have been.
Wow.
And that's how we dodged that bullet with it, just because we had good weather. Because it was crazy. 100%, if there's a weather delay, this exercise will be rescheduled to tomorrow. Same time, same channel. That would have been us.
That's crazy. Like, so they obviously completely rebuilt Green Ramp. When I was there, it was like, it's the facilities are phenomenal for airborne operations. I mean, you can load up tons and tons of people.
Yeah.
On the wooden benches and stuff. But there was one picture. It's like a poster size picture, and it's kind of like a semi memorial. There's an actual memorial for it on what used to be, that was Pope Air Base. And now it's Pope Army Airfield.
Yep.
It's no longer Air Force ownership. Okay. And that picture has like, it's kind of what you have behind you. Is that a Dietz painting behind you? That aircraft? It's a C-130. It's a old airfield in Edmonton, which is where the airborne used to fly out of. Okay. Yeah, because there's a I think it's Carl Dietz. He does a lot of pencil paintings, and they're really phenomenal. But it wasn't one of his, but it was very similar to that. And it was whoever did it was a kind of their depiction of the chaos of that day. And I was like, I remember being a young private, young specialist, and being like, oh man, that would have been an awful, like I couldn't even imagine like having to go through that if I was one of those guys. And then later on I became an officer, and I'm like, I would have hated to do that investigation. Oh my God. So many sworn statements to fill out. It would have been an absolute, it would have been massively catastrophic. Well, the event itself is obviously catastrophic. Yeah. You have all these aircraft loaded with people, full fuel, and burning jet fuel, and lots of it doesn't go anywhere fast, right? Yeah. So anybody caught in that is just a horrible way to go. You can't see it. And it's just devastating. We were so naive. We just didn't think anything of it. We had no idea this made the 6 o'clock news. Yeah. Were you married by then? And I was. Yeah. And that was one person that was worried. Like I think I phoned 2-3 days later, just a normal check-in. And I caught shit. She gave me hell for not sick about you. Yeah, like what do you mean? We were just like had no idea. Wow, that is crazy. So, news didn't travel as fast as it does today. And so it was like, there's a Canadian unit down there. They're training at this base. There's no information if they were involved, but they are blah, blah, blah. And again, like obviously your wife knows the bag. Yeah. Yeah. So that's crazy. If it was today, we'd like mark ourselves safe on Facebook. Vince's marked safe from Green Ramp disaster would have been today, right? But I would text right away, hey. Yeah. But just clueless. But apart from that,
apart from that tragedy, man, were we so well taken care of by the 325. We did multiple exercises together. I think every drop zone was Holland. What was fascinating to us is we call them gut trucks. So food trucks, modern day food trucks. Gut trucks are the gut wagon. They'd be pre-positioned on the side of a drop zone. Like literally we would walk over to the gut truck, buy snacks, and then carry on with the operation, which was foreign to us. Thought that was pretty cool.
I gotta jump in a pack
The
of
mess
Skittles.
halls were great. Mess halls were funny because in Canada, there is unlimited food. Nothing is weighed, nothing is measured. You go take it, you eat it, take your tray to the kitchen, to the drop off, and you're gold. Yeah, but I remembered because I remember asking for some rice and mashed potatoes, and she just looked at me like only one starch. And I remember saying, "What's a starch?" You know? So
what are you talking about?
We were shocked. We were shocked by all that, but food was great and mess halls are fun. And I think you guys had ice cream or something, but like it was good. Barracks were different, but because of Canadian border crossing issues, we didn't bring any firearms with us. So we just signed all of our firearms came out of your weapon stores. So I had at the time it was still the M60 machine gun. That was my weapon. Other guys were getting, basically M4s with M203 grenade launchers mounted underneath. And they were just like, we don't have this kind of kit. So we were in heaven. Awesome. Plus all of us were issued night vision for the operation, which was, we might have a piece of kit for one section, the same as a squad. So we were just this unlimited amount of ammo and kit. It was just, it was just heaven.
That's awesome. So that was 94. Yeah. That would have been probably PVS 7 Bravos or Deltas, because that's the two eyes that came to.
Oh, sevens,
yeah.
Yeah, 7.
Those are brutal.
They were still better than what we were using.
Oh, in 94, it's probably amazing. They were a generation better than ours, and they were so clear. I'm like, whoa, how come we don't have this stuff? Like, we still had, at that time, you had Kevlar helmets, and we were using Vietnam era. I think Canadian government went to the United States military surplus and said, you got any of those steel pots left over from Vietnam or World War II? We'll buy whatever you got, because you'd already moved on to Kevlar. That's crazy.
So
the old Darth helmet. When I was in airborne school, I was a private, and so they didn't have a large. I have a 7 7/8 head. It's massive,
Me too.
And so I get there, and they're like, oh, we're out of larges. Give them an extra large. So they gave me this helmet. I had the maximum amount of space you could have from your ears to the Kevlar. It was like 2 inches. I had these big old. I mean, they're like, so all my friends call me the Lord Helmet from Spaceballs. I was like, thanks guys, y'all are jerks.
Oh man,
not my choice.
My nickname was Head and a Half, and because it was a 7 7/8 head. Yeah, and to look at me, everything looks in proper proportion, but there's some depth. From forehead to the back of head, there's a little bit of extra length there. So that's where. Yeah. Anyway. I still have my jump helmet, actually. Yeah, there it is, sitting behind me. That helmet jumped into Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty.
All I see is a leather sweatband, and my head hurts just seeing that. So I always joke that I don't have a 4-head, I have a 5-head. So that's my big.
That's right. Joke. We would say glacis plate. You got a proper glacis plate up front.
So. That's crazy. Yeah. I can't believe that. I've
always
wondered.
You'll be point, and all the rockets will deflect off your head.
When you live in the airborne community, like you hear about certain things, a little bit about some stuff, and like I know the greatest thing about the American part of it is when we started jumping in the 40s, or actually late 30s officially, and you talk to like a World War II guy who jumped into Normandy or whatever, it's awesome because like there's this immediate understanding of we do it differently ish, but it's still the same concept, and it's still like the same crazy idea of like, all right, so we're gonna tie a string to your parachute and hook it to the aircraft. You have to put the baseline of what we're doing is a lot can go wrong here, but it could be fun.
So yesterday Saturday is Remembrance Day,
Yep.
November 11th. You guys call it Veterans Day.
Yep.
And Sunday, a buddy of mine, and he and I, who was also there back then, Green Ramp, Paul is his name. And so I phoned him up. We've been playing some phone tag, and I didn't get through. He didn't pick up. So my message was, I just went through the jump commands, right? I said, look this way, seatbelts off, stand up, hook up, check static lines, check your equipment, sound out for equipment check. And then I hung up. And then I said, stand by. And then I said, go. And then I hung up.
That's awesome. That's
it.
It never ends.
That just happened yesterday.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny. Those commands you said all those, they're just eerily similar to ours. But when I did my German jump, we had German jump masters, so they're giving all these commands, and it's like, I feel like they're chewing me out, but I'm just going to do what I know what to do. I don't know these words.
Why are they so angry at me?
Well, you mentioned the static line, like y'all toss it. They like the German judges, they took it from me. It wasn't like I'm going to pass it and you're going to move your hand and all. It was like, it's mine now. I was like, can I have my hand back? I'm going to need that. It was crazy.
Yeah, when we're going down, the stick, and we're just getting closer and closer to the exit. If I'm, let's just say right hand, we kind of as we get closer, that hand goes further and further behind the shoulder. And when it's our turn to exit, with absolute intention and force, again, this was my day. They may have changed the procedure today.
Yeah. But
back then we were still whipping it as hard as we could. And the jump master's hands was never anywhere near the carabiner. It was the snap fastener. It was just grabbing static line and making sure we were clear. And then we would do our exit, or a jab out there you go. Right. And we would do our jab out the door. So when we started doing our aircraft drills with the Americans, this is hard. I mean, it's kind of like, if we know anything about neural pathways, this muscle memory is, and they're like, stop doing that. And we didn't know what they were talking about. It took a few things, of course there's always a guy who just doesn't care and whips it anyways. So there was always some choice words whenever a guy didn't just politely hand off their snap fastener to the jump master.
So a lot of aircraft on that. Lots of trips to the mock airplane to fix that or train it differently. You don't just untrain something.
Yes. Remedial mock tower training.
Yeah.
Private blockers.
That's great. Well, thanks for sharing that story. I know that could have been a whole different version of that if you were one of the guys that were on there. And I'm glad you're okay. And I hope that the years later, I'm sure some of your friends probably were, people you may have known could have been involved in that. So, but I would like to kind of shift on that note towards, being out of the military in general for, 20 plus years, you just shared about, you're in touch with an old buddy, which I think is phenomenal. And I'm in a group text myself of about 16 guys from my platoon from 2006. And it is not a G-rated group text. It's pretty vulgar, and sometimes it's
nor should it be.
And it's just like it's our safe place, and nobody gets it more than we do. And we started that group text from what was a tragic event, which actually Veterans Day 9 years ago, one of our guys committed suicide. And so Veterans Day is a brutal day for us in kind of that mindset. And so since then we've like, hey, this is never going to happen again. None of us are going to go off and feel like we're alone. And like, we're here. We can talk about, how Texas football is the greatest thing in the history of the world, or Ohio sucks, or we can talk about, hey, where I'm having a baby, or hey, I'm getting a college degree, and great, whatever it is, so it's just our place, and it's great. But on that note, and just how you've been out, and just kind of what the struggles that you've gone through it all, and kind of how you've worked through them, and what do you do to maintain that camaraderie and stay kind of seek that connection and maintain it?
Getting out was unique in that at the time that I left the military, the Airborne Regiment the Canadian Airborne Regiment had been disbanded in March 1995. And it was incredibly political. There was lots of convenient reasons to disband the regiment. Discipline would have been one of them. other issues, but ultimately it was very much a political situation. And so it's a year later, my current agreement with the military, I joined for 3 years, and then I signed a letter of engagement for 4 more years. And so that engagement was up, and it was pretty much, okay, here's 13 years to get 20 for your pension or exit. And I was like, the regiment had been disbanded, and it kind of be like disbanding the NHL or the NFL. Would the person still stick around and play American Hockey League or play some sort of lower level amateur football? Would you still play? And a lot of guys said, yep, I'm in. I don't care. The military is my career. But for me, it was, for a lot of us, including me, it was, if you're going to disband, and by the way, 4 generals were part of an investigation and spoke to the Minister of National Defense and said, hey, the issues are isolated. What you're worried about isn't a thing. If 4 generals can't convince the Minister of National Defense and the Prime Minister that keep this unit, it's a valuable unit, we have a role, then what's me, a corporal, going to say and do? So I was pretty hurt and disenchanted, and I just thought, screw it, I'm out. So I got out under very different circumstances than, say, somebody else might get out. I didn't have much of a plan, oddly, considering who I am today, but I didn't really have much of a plan. Because I'd served 7 years, instead of getting a pension, I got a return of contribution. So any dollar ever invested into my future Army pension was basically just given back. So they gave me, I was 26 years old. They handed me a check for $16,000 and said goodbye. They helped me. They put me on a 1-week course to learn how to write a resume. That was it. So transition from military to private sector. We have programs for that today in both of our countries.
Absolutely.
But back then it was, here's a 1-week resume writing course that's done on base with other people getting out. Good luck. That was it. Oh, and here's your $16,000 check. So I left as a corporal making $34,000 a year, and really no clue what was next. Kind of hung low for a little bit. Got a job at a restaurant that I really enjoyed going to. They were hiring somebody who had an earring. What? You can't hire him. So I took a job as a server to protect them from this tragic piece of misguided youth.
Blasphemy.
So I was a server for a couple months, got a job as a sales rep selling photocopiers. I was downtown Edmonton, Alberta. And Alberta is kind of like the Texas of Canada. So it's, we sit on this massive oil reserve. So Edmonton is head office. So I'm selling photocopiers and fax machines in downtown Edmonton core. I see these bike couriers, and I started to really wish I was a bike courier because it was active, it was fitness, and I was outside and, wearing a suit and going up and down elevators and trying to hustle a photocopier. And it was a ton of rejection. Now, we've all been yelled at and screamed at and rejected, but usually the sergeant major relaxes a little bit and we go on some live fire shoot and have fun together. I just got rejection after rejection. There was no fun. So it was a little bit on the annoying side, frustrating side. And it's one of those industries, if you don't get immediate success, it's kind of like getting dumped into the deep end of the pool. Yeah. Not a lot of people want to help you out and figure it, right? So eventually kind of did. Year and a half later, I moved to Calgary, 3 hours south of me, and continued to do the same. And I would have a series of jobs over the course of 9 years in sales. So I did copier sales for 3 years. Then I did law enforcement equipment sales, which is actually a lot of fun because police departments were my customer. So I could speak the language, paramilitary people, and sell cool stuff that they wanted to buy. And I did see some really cool things, but in the back of my mind, the military continues to move forward, and there was a lot of fear of missing out. Did I do the right thing? If I'd stayed in, they promised me this, they promised me that. I didn't bite. I got out, and it was almost a daily reminder that life had meaning, even though I couldn't find a lot of meaning in it. So it was pretty lonely. And all my Army buddies, they just kind of continued on with their Army life, right? So there was bouts of loneliness that were not fun. There was a lot of self-doubt, second guessing. trying to figure out how to sell products and services as a skill was incredibly difficult for me. You know, the military's got chain of command and procedures, and you know, you start to realize the kind of support mechanisms that exist in the military for the purpose of military and training. Like there's a ton of training courses. Hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? And of course, that brotherhood.
Oh yeah.
Of someone, you know, just, hey, come here. You keep stepping on your dick. Come here. Let's help each other out. But that just didn't exist on Civvy Street. So that was the hardest part. And I really didn't feel anything good from an employment perspective until 9 years later. I'd done a variety of different sales jobs. I ended up at a private school coaching as a strength and conditioning coach. And that's where I land on my feet. And for the most part, I stay on my feet, because today I'm a professional coach. What a sports psychologist does for athletics and athletes, I do for CEOs. So, but I thought I was going to be in athletic coaching for the rest of my life. I was coaching rugby, coaching strength and conditioning, ton of fun. Realized I was basically still in sales, you know, making sure kids don't try to have a bench press competition when my back's turned and blow out something.
Yeah.
But I found camaraderie in athletics that I didn't find anywhere else in the private sector working. And that really, I don't know what it was for you when you got out, but for me, that camaraderie was gone. And I actually also felt pretty embarrassed amongst my military colleagues for getting out in the first place. I was really sheepish. I didn't reach out for help. They certainly didn't do anything. A couple guys and I stayed in touch, but I kind of felt like I didn't belong there. And I also didn't feel like I belonged on Civvy Street. It was a pretty weird place to be for a while.
I don't know, weird no man's land. I would like to hit on that. It's that's the most common thing I've noticed, is that people that get out of any form of military, kind of that 3 to 8 year window ish, because they have a short snapshot picture of just awesomeness, adventures, and all these things, and then those that kind of keep going. Like I did full 20, and like my transitions has been awkward because I've been in the Army longer than I've done anything else, like live, before that. And
right.
So I had time to kind of, take all these courses and stuff as I transitioned out. And like most of my Army buddies, like I said, they're from 2006. Like that's the group of people that I spend all my time with, people that I was with in my first 3 to 6 years. And so it's really interesting that that's who I see.
Yeah.
Is those guys. And I'm granted, we went through to hell and back, in firefights in Iraq and Afghanistan and everything. So we have this extreme level of stuff that's happened. So we our bond is that, now we're all grown up and got kids, and
yeah.
And you're like, I wouldn't parent like that.
Yep.
So we see the differences, but like that bond is there no matter what. So it's kind of interesting to see. I still pull back to that.
So, our regiment was disbanded in part for our very isolated behaviors, like extremely isolated behaviors in Somalia. And when the Canadian Airborne Regiment was deployed, if I look at the guys I talk to the most today, similar to you, it's all my deployment guys, all my deployment friends. There's a few guys outside of that deployment who I was super tight with and still am today. Yeah. Ken being one of them. But a lot of the guys that I stick and chat kind of with the most are the ones I suffered with the most. Yeah. When we came home from Somalia, we came home under a pretty dark cloud. We deployed December 1992. So just a few days before Christmas, no redeployment date. And everything was pretty hasty because Adid had, when the United Nations moved into Somalia, Adid's henchmen blasted this Pakistani peacekeeping force there, killed 26 of them in a nanosecond. And all of a sudden, everything flipped from peacekeeping to Chapter 7, which in civilian language would be peacemaking. So very different rules of engagement, very different deployment protocols. And all of a sudden, all of us, Canadian, American, Belgian, German, Italian, we all went under our own flag, no UN flag, thank goodness, our own colors. And we showed up with 4 rules of engagement: verbal show of force, verbal warning shot, lethal force. Yeah. And that had been the first time Canada had gone anywhere under those rules of engagement since the Korean War in context. We'd been on all sorts of peacekeeping operations, but you guys had had Grenada and Panama and Iraq One, Vietnam. Like, you had a lot of experience, very seasoned in terms of, let's say, just lessons learned, you know, like, so we had a lot of peacetime experience, but we didn't have this kind of experience. So anyways, we didn't have a redeployment date. We came home end of June, so 7 months in country. And then, of course, everybody knows the infamous Black Hawk Down. That happened shortly after our exit, 3 months later in October, right? Yeah. So when my regiment was disbanded, it was disbanded under this cloud of judgment, this cloud of shame that many guys haven't recovered from, literally. And while it's not our movie, Black Hawk Down, we feel as much pain as you can imagine for our American brothers who in the Rangers that went, and the Navy SEALs and Delta that went out on that day. We deeply feel, because that, for some of us, that was our area of operation to an extent. Mogadishu, mine was up in Beledweyne, which was north of that. But it was like, you know, survivor guilt. Like, you know, if we were there, we would have, like, I remember no one was willing to come and help the Americans in this fight. And like, we would have been, well, we'll go. We would have been there. So there's this survivor guilt of all that. So as odd and as that might sound, a lot of us are angry about that too, right? Yeah. You pulled us out, the job wasn't done. And because of that, you know, our brothers got hurt because of that. So there's this anger and animosity to the military. There's anger and animosity to our federal government and Veterans Affairs, and on and on and on. And that's the army that's the army I got out, left, right?
That's what it takes a while for that wound to kind of scab over, you know?
Well, how about this? It's kind of like stepping on a piece of glass. You don't even know it. You feel it, but then you don't really notice it's still in there. Then the body heals over it. And then one day you kind of feel this, why does that hurt? And all of a sudden you squeeze out this little piece of glass, and where did that come from? And then you got to think, oh yeah, remember that time? So that's a thing, you know, which happened to me years later when I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, thinking, you got the wrong guy, I didn't go anywhere, I didn't do anything, didn't see anything. Like, I was a mess. So,
survivor's guilt's a real thing. I think that's you know, I know a lot of my friends, you know, I actually have a whole idea of a podcast just for this topic, but it's the emotion that I think veterans in general of any service struggle with the most. There's a lot of emotions. There's fear, anger, you know, resentment, joy, happiness, any of those. We can handle most of those. I think the one that we suck at the most is helpless. And just the idea of helpless. Because I sat on a rooftop, you know, 800 yards away and watched mortars come in and decimate my friends. And I couldn't move because my whole team was security on that entire sector. So if we moved, the enemy could cross the river and we'd be really screwed, you know? So just watch chaos from a distance. And you know, you see just black smoke and you see people run, little ants running around people, and you hear the radio, just chaos, and you know, and all this stuff's going on. It's I struggle with that exact emotion of just like, it sucks. Nothing sucks more than what could I have done, you know, and in that moment, but I couldn't. So I can empathize, I guess is the word.
Well, so I get out in 96, and you know, the words that come to mind many years later are, I suck, I quit, I'm a coward, right? So I have the emotion, but I don't have the words for the emotion. And that's what I carry for a long time. In 2005, I'm working at a private school now. I'm doing that strength and conditioning job. And one of the grade 12 students came up and said, hey, you know, we're going to do this Remembrance Day assembly. You know, we heard you were a veteran. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your story from the context of a modern day veteran? And I naively just said, sure. And it was 2002 when my unit, the 2nd Battalion PPCLI, deployed to Kandahar. Actually, not Kandahar, Kabul.
Oh, cool.
I think it was up in Kabul. But there was an F6 there. So my unit Remember, I'm not there, I'm out, but it's my unit on the ground and they're doing some live fire shooting. But a US F-16 pilot sees muzzle flashes and makes the decision that this is enemy, makes a decision to drop ordnance on to their objective. Well, it wasn't Taliban. It was my unit. Four of us died. And one of the guys, for good or bad, thankfully, I didn't know the four guys. They're my regimental brothers. But one of the guys who did die one of the guys that did get injured, Lauren Ford, was a good friend of mine. He lost an eye and some tissue and a variety of bits and pieces. He's actually in the military today. He's still in.
That's awesome.
Hasn't jumped since then. He's been to the Invictus Games and stuff like that. He's like found his place, found his life and meaning. But I felt horrible for that. So I channeled that experience and I just said, this is what a real soldier is. Well, I started thinking about all the things that I did on my Somalia deployment, comparing my, according to me, worst behavior against Lauren's very brave and behavior of trying to recover from this injury. And he said word for word, a soldier, my job is to get, because what are you going to do now? And he's like, well, I'm going to get healthy and I'm going to get back on the battlefield. That's a soldier's job, is to be on the battlefield. Well, little did I know this was Pandora's box. And that's when that little piece of glass poking through my skin started. Where did this come from? Yeah. That's when that was quite honestly the beginning of a very slow death of 1,000 cuts began to happen in my life. Fast forward when Canada deploys from Kabul down into Kandahar area and all those AOs, 3 guys specifically, 2 of them from my platoon and 1 from another, were killed in combat in one fashion or another. And that's, that just raveled in my narrative, my headspace, my sense of being, my sense of value started to just erode away. And the one that hurt me the most was, there's a particular guy, Mike Starker. So here we are here in Calgary, everything's fine and safe in life. And I'm at this person's house. He coached our rugby club as a rugby coach. And I'm just there to tell him, look, thank you for your help and service this year. We're not going to re-employ you for next rugby season. Well, all of a sudden he says, well, fine, I'm just going to top myself. And I said, top yourself? What does that mean? And he takes his thumb like it was a knife and he draws it across his throat and lets his tongue hang out. And I thought, you're going to kill yourself because I'm telling you we're not going to hire you next year. Do I have that right? He goes, what's the point? Wow. The person beside me was one of my club teammates, Angie. She's also a Calgary police officer. Well, and she's pregnant, which is in part why I was there to support this dismissal. But she very quietly dismisses. I didn't even see her exit the room. Well, she calls Calgary police and Calgary ambulance. She has an obligation that if someone's going to threaten suicide, she's going to call it in. So 20 minutes later, EMS is on scene. Calgary police isn't. And EMS decides, well, screw it, we're coming in. They're supposed to wait, right? Mm-hmm. So who's coming in? Mike Starker. He and I were in Somalia together. He's paratrooper. He's now out. He's a civvy.
Now
and he's
an
EMS man. So he's like, well, I'm not waiting. Someone's at risk. I'm going. So neither of us know each other's on scene. He comes in, he goes, Vince. And I'm like, Mike. Mm-hmm. So his partner starts to de-escalate the situation. Me and Mike catch up and he says, hey, just wanted to know I'm deploying to Afghanistan. I'm like, that is so awesome. Super supportive. Make sure you give me your address. I'll send you some porn mags, I say, right? So we have a laugh and about 3 months later, I'm just sitting on my desk at school and an email pops up and it's from a buddy of mine who's deployed. So it's his wife that emails me, but I read the thread and it just said, hey, you got to let Vince know Mike died. Wow. And I'm reading that email middle of the day at school. And that's the one that hit me the most. Just as I read the email about Mike's death in Afghanistan, it was a big firefight and the firefight appeared to be over and they're doing ammo and casualty count, and they don't get anything from Mike. And they go over to him and they shake him. He's unconscious, but there's no entry wound. There's no exit wound. Like, what is going on? Like, did he just pass out? What happened? Well, upon further investigation, a bullet did go in, and it went through an open. He had his mouth open at the time, so it went through his mouth into the back and severed the spinal cord, but it never exited. And so he was dead instantly. But so I don't know these facts at the time. I just know that Mike's dead. And at the very same time, my principal of the school, he walks into my room just as I drop the F-bomb, like, oh, fuck, this happened. And he goes, so he pretends to give me hell for swearing in the school. And I said, not today. Yeah. And he goes, I gather you know the news. And I said, if you're talking about Mike, I know the news. And so all of a sudden, everything I believed about Mike was, here's a guy died doing his thing, his way. All of us believe this. Like, Mike was a medic in Afghanistan, and yet he was a door kicker, right? He wanted to always, like, Mike, you're a medic. Get the hell back. Get the hell back. You're a medic.
Stop leading the fight.
So we know, and I've since met with his platoon commander, and he threw down the map. It was just like sitting through an after action report. And he told me how it all went down. And it was such a bittersweet moment, because Mike did everything right, and the result was unlucky. Yeah. At any rate, I compared my worst behavior in Somalia with Mike's very heroic behavior. And that's ultimately what undid all the raveling. And while I couldn't, I had lots of coping strategies as an athlete and as a coach and everything else like that. That was 2008. And it wouldn't be until 2019, 11 years later, when I was very lucky to bump into someone and who kindly offered me some help. And I naively said yes and went through treatment. But yeah, it's one hell of a journey. Yeah, and it never ends. I'm glad it happened. No, it never ends.
Oh. Well, I couldn't appreciate more your honesty and vulnerability. I think there's, the Canadian side, y'all's involvement in the wars for the past 20 years is, forgive my ignorance of how much they're involved, but on the American side of it is, millions of people, that we've cycled through over the past 20 years. And I think there's a massive amount of people that have similar thoughts and emotions of trying to rank, grade, or evaluate and compare. Well, I only did this. I was only an MP, or I was only a cook, or I was only a mechanic. I was an infantry, but I never got in a fight. I was a tanker, never got to fire a round. Whatever it is. I mean, there's an infinite list that we can go through. We're not trying to make fun of anybody's job if you're listening.
Yeah.
But it's just,
we like, compare.
I was talking to Joss in his episode, like, I mean, what are the odds that you joined the American Army infantry after Desert Storm and got out before 9/11? I mean, it's just like the weirdest window of time, to do that. And it is, as you said in his episode, this is a point of struggle of like, am I actually a veteran? And I think not so much that emotion in this regard, but it's the, kind of a weird shame and guilt that doesn't, self-shame, self-guilt, and I don't know. There's probably a better vocabulary. I'm a math person, so big words are not my thing. But how we just kind of look at it and be like, oh, the great example is the American Purple Heart, or Medal of Honor. It took years to award one, and because our generation, we're like, well, I mean, have you read Audie Murphy's Medal of Honor? It's like, we didn't do that, the guy, I forget the guy's name from Vietnam. He got, the Hispanic or Indian guy, he got put in for like 3 of them, and they had to give him.
Yes, I know that. I can't think of his name. I can see his face.
Yeah, he gives a great speech. My brain just stopped. But it's like, well, I didn't do that. I didn't carry out 5.
Canada is still, Canada still to this day has yet to award a Victoria Cross, our version of the Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
I don't think we gave one out in Korea. And if we did, that's the last time. That's 1953, but something tells me it's World War II. It's that in itself to me is actually the shame of it all. That especially it becomes like some sort of HR tasking that a bunch of people who have no context sit around and didn't tick this box and didn't tick that box. And all because this particular act of bravery is outside of the 10-year window of certification. Well, even if it did qualify, we can't. What? Even if it did qualify, you can't because it's outside of a 10-year window. Yeah. Are you insane? Yeah. It's horrible. You know, one of the things that is unique about us Canadians is that in this day and age, if you think in context, there's all in, you have 3.5. Sorry, what's the total population of the current U.S. military? Would you say, like full regular and reserve? Yeah, all branches and reserves.
Oh gosh, I couldn't.
Are you 3.5 million?
No. It's I want to say like 2.6. If you take every branch and the reserves, I think I may be off on that.
All branches: Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast. Well, forgive the Coast Guard. We'll put them aside for a second.
They're back in the DoD now.
And then all your National Guard.
Yep.
Okay, good. So we'll include them. We're like 100,000. I remember when we went down to Bragg and Liberty then, sorry. I only just found out it was Fort Liberty. So when we went to Fort Bragg then, you had like 86,000 people on that base.
Yeah.
All branches, right? Pretty much our entire military was 95,000, right? So you could fit all of us on that one base. Yeah. I think today we're still under 100,000. So we're tiny. And because of our limited resources, all the troops are heavily trained on like different multiple weapon systems and such. And this is just regular infantry. This doesn't include if you go off to the Canadian Special Operations Regiment, or which have even more disciplines. So they got mountain warfare, desert warfare, winter four, and then even more if you go up to JTF, which is our version of SEALs. And every time I talk to the guys that are still in, they all say how respected they feel by our American family. But we're just a tiny little blip on the military radar, right? And so at any rate, we're really, we're good troops. Because of our limited resources, we're a little bit of a nasty little hoarder. Like if we need 10 batteries, we'll order 50 and hopefully get 5. And if we do get a few more, we keep them.
It balances out. 100.
And if we do something cool, back to the comparison, we compare ourselves to our American, our British counterparts. So that comparison is an issue. It's a human thing. Yeah. And like I had that, for the longest time, I wondered, am I still a veteran because I did this, I didn't do that. And to hear Joss's interview with you, his podcast with you, first thing I did was call him up and say, hey dude, you're a veteran, man. You signed the check, you signed that level of commitment. It's how the military chose to deploy your resources is not in your control, but you said, hey, I'll do whatever you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I wrap things up here in a bit. I got to ask you one last question. With all of this, and your story of Mike, and it being Veterans Day, and y'all call it Remembrance Day, and we used to call it Armistice Day back in the day. And it's not about
so much
memorial, but as veterans, we don't forget our friends. So toast the memory of Mike. And I feel that there, and I'd ask you, as things that you've dealt with. What's an encouraging thing you could, or advice you would give a veteran that's listening to this, saying, oh man, I can relate to measuring my service or measuring my experience, and I'm struggling. What would you say they should do, or how a way forward to?
The most immediate thing that comes to mind to anybody listening, and I really hope they are, is that you matter. You might not have spoken to me or you, Travis, in years, or maybe we didn't even serve in the same regiment, but I would say that you truly do matter. And if you're in a really dark place like I was, really dark, for me, I couldn't figure out how to take my own life without hurting others around me. Meaning, if, trying to figure out how to kill myself wasn't the hard part. There's all sorts of ways, and they would be very final. They'd be very, very, very successful endings. But the question was, I just didn't want to hurt anybody in that process, meaning I didn't want them to, I didn't want my kids to miss me or my wife to miss me, and I just couldn't solve that piece of the puzzle. And I was at a point where the point that I felt at was, I don't matter. My contribution was meaningless and insignificant, and the world would be better without me in it. That was where I was at. I just couldn't solve that particular emotional problem. And I would say to anybody who's sitting in a chair or whatever, and just kind of thinking this, hey, do I matter? Is there any meaning? Is there any hope for the future? And just kind of coming up with zeros in every sort of outcome is, wouldn't it be amazing if we could give that person a chance to see their own funeral and watch everybody who comes together, who misses you, loves you, wishes they had one more conversation with you, wishes they had another chance to laugh with you, bullshit with you, tell a story, tell a lie. And because you do matter, you absolutely do. And maybe we don't talk to each other enough. Maybe we don't reach out enough. They always say, hey, we'll see a post on Facebook. Just so you know, if you're feeling rough, you can call me. Here's my number. We as the survivors, shall we say, have to be way more proactive than that. Yeah. So if we're on the good side of the black hole, then we have to proactively reach out to the people we care about and love and haven't spoken to in a while. Yeah. We have a duty to check in. But to the person who's listening, that's just, somebody sent me this episode, I promised to listen, is, I don't care who you are, man or woman, irregardless of the time served, where you served, none of that's relevant. You 100% matter. There is help. I can speak for Canada for sure. We have, Veterans Affairs, which can be slow as molasses in winter sometimes. But, this is true story. A buddy of mine who said, Vince, I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm seriously considering, checking out. His name's Jamie. And I said, for fuck's sakes, Jamie, if you kill yourself, don't use a firearm, because I don't want you to ruin my firearms license ownership rules that we have, because our firearms laws are already screwed up. And so we both laughed. And he's, so leave it to two paratroopers to, yeah, don't fuck it up for me, Jamie. Use a rope or something.
Sorry.
Yeah. But I said, look, you and I are going to talk every single day. And, we're going to check in every single day. And I need you to tell me exactly how you feel. Yeah. And so I made some calls, found out, and then put Jamie on to the trail, and he got into the system, and he's one of the happiest people he's ever been.
That's good.
So, but it's a team effort.
It is, absolutely.
No one's going to judge. Like, if someone says, hey, I think I'm at my end here, I just can't bear another day. None of us are going to judge. We're just going to say, what do you need? I will help. And Jamie's a 12-hour drive for me. So it wasn't even like I could get in the car and head over. Yeah. Right. I could only do this from the phone and text. And so.
Yeah. FaceTime.
But
so, well, that's
anything, right?
I think that's the key point is be available, and whatever the resources you have is to give them. So I think that's a great point. And I agree, you matter. And I think shifting the brain set of believing that is the hardest part. So, well, on that really solemn note,
it's hard,
but I really appreciate your time and your vast openness and
Yeah.
ability to share. I mean, some funny stories, of course, and you know, the fun world of being a paratrooper, and some solemn times. But I think it's important for us to know that that's, if we don't tell the stories, we'll forget them. And you know, I've, you know, just my granddad passed away, you know, 6 days ago, something like that. And you know, he's
Oh, wow.
104, a week and a half from being 104. You know, and it's like,
Wow.
it's like my dad was telling me, you know, what stories we're gonna tell at his funeral. I'm like, there's 100 years of stories. Like, where are we gonna start? You know,
103 and a
you
half.
know, so it
Like,
was just kind of a, it was cool to, like, we all knew these stories of his
yeah.
life, you know, and I'm sitting at the table and he telling these stories about churning milk and making cream, and you know, I'm like, it's just a different world. But my granddad had told those stories and experiences so many times that everybody knew them. And I think that's the thing, is like, let people in your life, you know, and let's suffer together and stuff. But Viz, I'd love to have you back on, man. If you're, since you're in contact with your buddies, you know, it would be an awesome time to have like a larger group podcast, I think, and just honestly, just a bunch of paratroopers, have a glass of whiskey, and we can just be really stupid and be a lot of fun. So we'll have to schedule a time. But for those out there that are new listeners, thank you for listening this far. If you've listened the whole entire hour, that's pretty impressive. Be sure to subscribe. And if you have a story or a vet you want to tell it, by all means, reach out to me through my website or my email. It's all on the podcast. And I'd love to have you on as a guest.